first things first, got to start with Dawn Baldrug and
Oh, yeah.
softball as a whole. But I mean, just the season, forget the week, the season she's had, it's been absolutely tremendous. And we knew, and we especially coming in, she had a lot on her shoulders. Obviously, last year, a lot of success came from her in the circle. She also had Melissa Rorick assisting her, and Rorick was the one to her too. Now, obviously, Rorick and a lot of other seniors graduating over the off season. So Baldrug was the key returner. And I said in our preview, her success is really going to dictate how well this softball team plays. And truthfully, the rest of the team has stepped up as well, to fill that. But, over the last month plus, Dawn Baldrug has been on fire. And, these two no-hitters and her cementing herself in history with 4 no-hitter / perfect games overall, which is the most in program history.
Well,
it's absolutely phenomenal.
The one that I called on Tuesday was not a perfect game. She actually walked a couple people. But
last year was a perfect game.
I'll tell you something, though. But here's the thing, and it's because I don't do softball that often. I do mostly baseball, right? So I know there's a mercy rule, but it's the furthest thing from my mind in the 6th inning. But everybody's gunning for that 8th run. When they score the 8th run, it's like a walk-off. And I'm like, wait a minute. Of course, it was scored on a head-first slide home plate. Wait a minute. Is she out? Wait a minute. Oh, wait, mercy rule. Gotcha. Okay.
Don't worry, man. They're going to implement that soon in baseball. And they took the runner starts a second in softball.
Oh, please
and a
don't.
whole lot of other issues.
I hate mercy rules. I understand the point of view of a mercy rule, especially back in the days. And Greg, of course, you remember vividly 20 years ago, like when you were just graduating Stony Brook, where with women's sports and women's basketball in particular, you had your handful of great programs and that big drop-off afterward. No mercy rule in women's basketball, but I remember vividly a game where we played Southampton and won 88-10. So, yes, you basically a team that was, and that's Division III, a team that was recruited and put together and legitimately coached versus a team that was basically put together an open tryout. And it was like major league, find out, that person's dead, cross her off then,
Yep. I think the rest of the American East would wish they had that for women's lacrosse. How dominant they've been, winning 56 straight now, I believe, in conference action. We'll get to them later, but just Matt, with you being there, just her pitches and her location from Baldrug, it's absolutely phenomenal. Just how untouchable she really is.
Well, that's the thing. And you think that she gets behind an account and you think, uh-oh, here comes trouble. Doesn't happen.
Never.
All of a sudden, she gets her hitter swinging and, just continue on. And, whoever's up next. But I'll tell you something else. We had a pretty good crowd in the stands. And I'm thinking, okay, word must be going around that Dawn's throwing a no-hitter. But then a whole bunch of people leave. And I'm like, wait a minute. And I said this openly. And I said this to where people could hear. We're watching a no-hitter here. Why are you leaving? And apparently it was for a class. And somebody in the stands told me they were there for a class. I was like, you're watching a no-hitter.
Yep. Yeah, well, they witnessed something. I think they're going to be back. And just, from personal experience, just covering softball for a few years now and, seeing, I think, really the growth of this team with, I think, these all-star caliber players. And we saw during when I was still a student, Melissa Rorick was the one that drove fans to the stands. Now it's definitely Dawn Baldrug.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you never know. I mean, when she comes out there, you never know what you're going to get. I mean, first of all, you're going to get a good performance regardless. But the question is, will she give up a hit?
Right. And it's phenomenal. I just picked from Coach Bryant, picking her from junior college. She's had a great couple seasons. And again, just her pitching ability is incredible. She has great fastball, but really it's her drop ball that is just stuns batters, As she throws the pitch and you think it's coming up high, all of a sudden that thing just dips well below the knees. Well, by the time you try to stop yourself, you already saw him.
The one thing that, because of where I was sitting for this particular game, was on the third base side and close to the opposing dugout. So you don't get to see, and people sitting in dugouts, baseball and softball will tell you this all the time, you don't really get to see breaking balls because they look straight to you. Yep. Okay, the best way to view what kind of an optical illusion, and that's what it is, that these breaking balls provide, the drop ball, or even her rise ball is pretty good too. And what they do to you and how they fool you is you have to be directly behind. You have to see what the hitter sees. And Yes, it doesn't, and people have complained about this all the time, especially when they're viewing from the sides of the field. That I don't see why these pitches look perfectly straight to me. Is it no, just the slightest difference in spin can provide an optical illusion that's diving down on you and you swing and miss. Okay, you have to understand the point of view, the three-dimensional point of view of looking at pitches.
No, absolutely. And again, that's one of the reasons why she is, arguably the best pitcher, at least in the conference. And you could probably even extend that to just the state as a whole. And there's a lot of great pitching in New York as well. But I mean, it's just, again, her location is just absolutely remarkable to me. And, she's definitely, to me, I think with Courtney Coppersmith, she's been out for a little bit. Just with her gone, to me, Ball Drug is really, the best pitcher, I think, in this conference. Maybe Allison Amaral from Binghamton is up there too, but she's just so great at really just striking batters out, and a lot of them is swinging. She only has 38 strikeouts called looking. The rest of them, that's over 150 strikeouts. But batters thinking they get their bat on the ball, and it's just not happening.
Well, the other thing that's amazing about it, and this is what I said about the no-hitters, because what she did was she pitched in the second game against Maine, put two innings in there, actually gave up a hit. So, the hitless streak is not indefinite, and she gave up a hit against Providence today. Yesterday. Okay, so, she's not absolutely perfect, but let me put it this way, folks. In her last four outings, and that includes she only got only threw 6 innings against SJU because of the mercy rule. So you add up the innings, 7 and 2 is 9, and 6 is 15, and 7 is 22. She's given up only 2 hits.
Insane, unreal video game numbers.
Then you add up the strikeouts. 16 in the no-hitter against Maine, 4 in the 2 innings in the second game, so that's 20. Add another 15, that's 35. And then add another 18 that she had against Providence. And remember, 7-inning game, 21 outs. And this same thing happened with St. John's, okay, where you had 18 outs and 15 strikeouts. So only three outs on contact. So that's the sick thing about it. So you get 35 and add 18 to that. That's 53. Okay, 53 strikeouts. In, as we said, 14-2 is 16 and 6 is 22 and 7 is 20. Yeah, unbelievable.
It is, and I think the rest of the rotations not half bad themselves.
Yeah, 22 innings, 35 strikeouts and 22 innings.
It's insane. It's DeGrom and Cole numbers, right?
53 strikeouts. I said 22 innings.
Right. Absolutely. And like I said, it's DeGrom and Cole numbers just equated to the MLB game. For the rest of softball, she ranks 12th in strikeouts, and you got other studs like Georgina Corrick, Hannah Hoge from USC, Daniel Williams, Northwestern. These are, premier level players, and Ball Drug is up there with them, showcased, and she is one of them, Matt.
Yeah, well, early on in the season, she did have 15 strikeouts against Utah State. Drexel got to her, in her first start back on February 25th, and she did get a couple of losses. I mean, her one-loss record is 12-5, but she's been invincible, for the past month or two, and no one's going to touch her. No one's going to touch her the rest of the year, which is a shame because when you go to the schedule, and again, we're dealing with this with all the sports except women's lacrosse, and the problem you have is that non-conference schedule when everybody's, still feeling out there, what they're going to be doing. They, of course, have a 20-10 record. They didn't play any, really high-ranking teams, but they did win a lot of games in those tournaments to start the season. Is it enough? 22 South Florida lost in 8 innings, 1-0. Okay, there's your ranked team right there. Okay, got swept by Fordham in a doubleheader in the A-10. So is this enough to get any kind of at-large consideration? And my short answer is I have my doubts.
Yeah, big doubts because, for as good as she's been, and even the rest of the team, they have double the amount of wins than they do losses. They're not a top 100 team in terms of, RPI. So that's a big thing right there where, they're kind of in the middle of the pack with everyone. at least entering this week. And, maybe these wins against Providence, for example, who are ahead of them, and a Big East team, they entered 21-9. Maybe it could bump them up a little bit, but it's gonna take a lot of moving. But
Well, that's the
still,
other thing. The
just
Seton Hall
tip
rain
their hats
out.
to them.
Here's the funny thing, too, okay? And we all know what the difference between postponed and canceled means. Postponed means you plan on making it up. Canceled means you don't. And the third game against Maine last weekend, where Bodrick threw a no-hitter there, then they split against Maine, by the way. The third game was canceled. So the Seton Hall games that were scheduled to be played last Wednesday, doubleheader, those are just postponed. How they're going to make those up, I have no idea. And again, because it's non-conference, what's the point of making them up? I mean, yes, it might figure into maybe an at-large bid, but the team isn't ranked, despite the fact they have a great pitcher.
I would think ranking, and also just because in softball you need a certain amount of games played. I forget what it is exactly. I think it's 35, maybe a little bit more.
That could
I think
be
it's
it.
something like 42. So, because I do remember a couple years ago where Stony Brook was in danger because they had so many cancellations because of rain delays.
Well,
so
they've already played 30, so
I think it's something like 42. It's a number like that. I know that. So,
we can look that up while you're talking. So
yeah, but still, just going back to the team as a whole, Baldrug did great, but the rest of the team, I thought held their own. Obviously, in that game against St. John's, it was everyone played great. Catherine and Kapinski, I thought, also had a good week. Not only in that game, but also against Providence, where she went 2 for 3 in, I think, game 2. Yeah, that was the first game, and hit a home run that gave the Seawolves the 2-0 lead for game 1. So, and she drove home the only other run scored in game 2. So, it's good for her, and just seeing those new names, as I said, her Corinne Badger as well, those two stepping up. Yeah, it's definitely been positive for this team. That's really been on a roll. Yeah.
And it continues. And coming up for them, as we said, the Providence, no runs. They swept Providence in a doubleheader and gave 3-0 and 1-0. Let's make that clear too.
Denman and Milas also held their own, which is big because they've both been. Denman's been good all season long. Milas is starting to figure out, I think. And watching Baldrug having a front row seat to those no hitters, I think definitely helps out in terms of the mechanics.
Okay, but here's something else that's very important too, is that they're going to be on the road for a couple of weeks because they have a midweek doubleheader at UMBC, and then next weekend they're going to be at Binghamton, and then another midweek doubleheader at Fairleigh Dickinson, and they're not back home until April 21st, which is 11 days from now, and they're going to have a doubleheader against Manhattan, and then we'll host Hartford that weekend. But the nice thing about it, guess what? They're not on the road again until the first weekend in May, which ends the regular season, the 3 games up in UMass Lowell. Mm-hmm. So we get to watch them a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And just to bring Greg in conversation, obviously, just from the coaching side, how big is it for a team, especially where, you're going back and forth often, but to kind of have those streaks where, all right, this week is only on the road, and then for the next couple of weeks, we're only playing in front of our home crowd.
Well, a couple different things. First off, I think we get back to the, Matt, you brought it up earlier in the conversation. It's just a mercy rule thing. I just think with softball, if you're going to do these double headers and you're going to do it midweek, I think that's why the mercy rule really is in effect. I really think that's the sole purpose of it. And until all the places have lights, I think if you're going to try and get double headers in, you got to have the mercy rule. That's just my opinion with that one. That's
it's understandable. There's no doubt about it. But the only reason I was a little bit, first of all, yes, a little bit surprised by it being invoked like that, because again, not used to it. But also, think about it too. I mean, has it been invoked in any of Stony Brook's other games this year? The answer to that is, I believe, no. But the important thing here is that, well, they beat Fairfield 13-5. Let's take a look at that real quick.
I think they may have done that to Army, as a matter of fact. West Point Army.
They did not. Here's the thing. They were at Fairfield, okay, and they went up. Well, the trick here is that Fairfield scored all 5 of their runs in the second inning, and Stony Brook didn't go up 8 until the 7th. If you were up 8 runs after 5, and and Fairfield had last licks. So even though they were up 8, mercy rule wasn't invoked.
Yeah, I was
Fairfield
gonna say
batted in the bottom of the 7th.
they got it a couple times. Obviously, against Army, they won 10-1. That was a 5 inning game. The
Yeah.
second game of the season, second game of the San Classic, they won in 5 innings. But those
Okay.
are on the road, and you don't see it too often. At University Field. But
Yeah.
starting to see that though more, I think definitely benefits this team, Greg.
I think also with the tournament as well too is where you're going to see a lot of that mercy stuff because you got in the games and you're trying to get these. There's only so many fields that you can play with. But back to your original question, as far as like your team and stuff like that, let's give a real shout out here to Coach Bryan. As a matter of fact, right? I can remember not too long ago when the women couldn't win a game.
Oh yeah,
right? And now, like when she took over, I mean, it was kind of like in a little bit of disarray, the program, and I mean, she has really built quite the program here. With that, I think I wouldn't be too concerned. The only thing that concerns me the most is the traveling, right? So you're always when you're on the road, midweek against Providence, and then coming back to and doing. Providence over the weekend here, and then going to UMBC in the middle of the week, and then back to Binghamton. That's the stretch that bothers you a lot because you just get fatigued from not being home. You just that travel. You guys know when you go on vacation or you go somewhere, when you're out for a couple of days, you're just looking to be back home. And I think that's kind of what's going to happen here to the women a little bit.
Living out of a suitcase, yeah.
Yeah, it gets tiresome doing that, and then.
Well, at the very least,
are right. It's a long time to get back to Manhattan to be home.
At the very least, though, they're not all on the road all the time. I mean, they come back home, take their classes, and go back out on the weekend, something like that. And Manhattan College is a bus ride, so it's somewhat local. I mean, if we really wanted to, we could do the game, but
right.
And when I say we do really want to, the problem is we have conflicts with others, and we have to pick and choose our opportunities. But the important thing here is that this team has really started to gel even more. It's not necessarily the most powerful offensive team. They're not going to beat you into the ground, but they have good enough pitching to stay in games, which is very, very important. It really is such a shame. I'm going to open up the America East standings because even though obviously Stony Brook doesn't matter to them other than regular season championship, obviously, you have to go into the what if. And the what if
they got the best overall record, 20-10.
US
Lowell's 19-12, and Stony Brook just started conference play now,
right?
So,
and Stony Brook is only 1-1 in conference. So,
right. But over the past few years, we've seen they've been the best to second best team behind UMBC.
Yeah, well, UMBC is 4-2 and 19-6. So they do have a little bit better record, but UMass Lowell is also pretty solid at 19-12. But
picked up the past couple of years, for sure.
With Budrug, you have a fair chance, a puncher's chance of winning that tournament and going to the NCAA. And having that rug pulled out from under you again, we'll talk about it over and over again. But the whole point is that you're not getting in on at-large based on your non-conference record. It's just not enough meat in it. But you definitely had a legitimate chance of winning the tournament.
Yeah, at least these games send a message, and even as some of their non-conference schedule, they played CAA opponents like Drexel. It was a tight game; they lost 5-4. They played Hofstra, where they beat them back in March 7-0. So they're starting to get the feel, for what's coming up in the future, and kind of sending a message, to these teams that we're not gonna, we're not gonna roll over.
We're not gonna
have a couple years of struggle
to the CAA. What UMass Lowell and NJIT were to the America East when they first joined.
Yeah.
And Hartford on the way out.
Right.
Okay. And even Hartford, all the Hartford athletes, I mean, I have to definitely give a lot of recognition and praise to the Hartford athletes who are basically in a dead-end situation. Because once they graduate, there are no scholarship athletes behind them. It's D3 all the rest of the way. But they're playing their hearts out. They're playing for something. They have 12 wins. They're 1-5 in conference, but they have 12 wins. And here, Hartford putting on a show in other sports as well, and saying, we're not dead yet, folks. Don't just walk all over us.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things that you realize that, well, I think high school kids don't realize when they're going into college. The bigger jump is not from Division III to Division I. The biggest jump is from high school to college. So you have guys or women that are already in and have been playing for a couple of years. By the time even if they're Division III players, by the time they're seniors, they can compete at the level of probably an incoming Division I athlete. In certain sports. Obviously, this was basketball, football aside. I think, those are different stories. But with some of the other sports, for sure, lacrosse. I do think baseball as well and softball as well too, that you can compete as a Division III athlete later on in your career after you bulk up, you get bigger, you see the game a little bit differently, and you improve a lot.
Well, I'll even go back to Hartford again because we're talking about the 1-5 in conference. Is looking at their schedule, and they got swept by UMass Lowell and dropped 2 out of 3 at UMBC, and those are the only 2 America East opponents they've played so far. So the top 2 teams, other than Stony Brook, obviously, where they will be coming to us on April 23rd, as we mentioned, but they are home against Albany. They got us, and then they go to Binghamton and go and finish at home against Maine. So, they could be mid-pack.
Yeah, they really could. And I think the we talked about it last week, Matt, as well too. The doubleheader against UMBC midweek, and then playing them again in a single game on Wednesday the 27th at home just seems such an odd blip in the schedule, doesn't it?
It's pretty obvious they had to fit something in somehow,
right.
And that is extremely weird, especially given the recent history with UMBC and Stony Brook, playing for all the marbles. And again, these schedules were planned long before any America East tournament decisions were made. So they knew this going in, what they were going to be dealing with. And yeah, it really is strange. But, it's another one of those shrug your shoulders. Must have been something to do with COVID. The first thing you think now, you have to ask around and find out what really happened. But your first assumption, that's it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and
go ahead.
Does the conference schedule the games ahead of time, or do you allow the leeway as a coach to schedule the games? Do you guys know that?
Well, the conference does schedule the games ahead of time. I don't know how far ahead of time. That's the question. It has to be sufficiently ahead of time because the coaches make up the non-conference schedules. They call up, and that's one of the reasons why, for example, we ended up getting Syracuse on the road last year, a home and home with Syracuse on men's lacrosse, despite them never having played before, and Syracuse not liking to venture far from home in their non-conference schedule, okay, was because there was a gap. And I think personally that there was more to it, that Syracuse wants more of a relationship with Stony Brook because Joe Spallina's sons are going there, but that's speculation. There's nothing official about that. But you know what? The more the merrier. If we get to face Syracuse on a regular basis, where they weren't even giving us a time of the day for the first 30+ years of our existence, great.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Definitely jump into the mix into that action. So, Ken, as we go looking forward here with the softball, I mean, they do then have a big midweek matchup here at UMBC. There's no doubt about it, right?
Yeah, and playing for pride, obviously, against UMBC, against Binghamton's definitely it's definitely gonna be that what if, right? They're going in treating this like, all right, this is the playoffs right here, because these are the 2 likely teams they would have faced off. Obviously, UMBC in that final spot, but definitely going in, trying to get those last wins over them, because who knows next time these teams are going to play each other. So for them to win, obviously UMBC still has great pitching even with Coppersmith out. So for them, the offense has just got to be a bit more consistent, be a bit more active, I think. That St. John's game, they were there, but the games against Providence, it was really only 1 or 2 batters, that whose bats were awake, as I said, in Kopinski, obviously Jacobson as well, Corrine Badger. That was it for that weekend series. So you want to see more of what you saw against Sacred Heart, where they won 10-6 and 7-0, or against Maine, where they scored 5 runs, 7 runs. So that would be big. But it's also funny because we're just the baseball, just how for the softball team, pitching defines them, but for baseball, it's really been the offense that's been their key to success.
Yeah, it really goes in the opposite direction for them, and I think that we've talked about it before, but just and I think this weekend, let's be honest about it. When you look at the three games this weekend, from when you look at Friday, 12-3 with a win, all bats. On Saturday, they lose 5-3, no bats. And today, 10-5, back with the bats. So that is really kind of, I think, what Coach Sank is kind of massaging right now, right? And so with Nick DeGennaro out, and now it was officially he actually had the surgery on Wednesday, Ken?
Not this Wednesday. Obviously,
It was
weeks
a few
back,
weeks
he's
ago,
done.
right?
Yeah, essentially out for the season. Yeah, so they're still, with him gone, they haven't really had that ace, and they've been looking for him.
Yeah, but as long as as you say, as long as the bats are producing, then I guess you kind of feel good about that. But it is true. If they're not going to get strong batting, if they're not going to jump, I think one of the keys, though, is to jump out early. And that's what they did on Friday and today as well, too. Friday with the 4 runs in the first inning and today with the 2 runs in the first inning. I think it gives the pitcher who's on the mound a little bit of leeway and a little bit of, rope to play with, shall we say, when they're out there, so they can become a little more confident, a little more comfortable, and know that, one bad inning isn't gonna crush them, and they can kind of stay in. They're not looking over their shoulder for the to see who the next pitcher is going to be. And I think that's important for these pitchers right now.
Well, in the opener against Albany, the Seawolves jumped on them early and basically never looked back. But Albany kept them in for quite some time until the bullpen came in. The one thing that impresses me most now is the development of the pitching staff, where Sank can set up, his bullpen. That he knows who his go-to guys are, and he knows how far he can carry them, how far he can keep them out there. And that's going to be over the course of the end. The thing with this, because you're in the one bid conference, and the CAA is going to be the same, okay, is that the entire season, even during the regular season, obviously you want to qualify for the playoffs, and obviously you want to qualify for the highest seeding possible. And if home field is available to you, and it hasn't always been, because remember, they've played a few years up at UMass Lowell universally, you want home field advantage. So, yeah, those are things you're playing for in the regular season, but it's a developmental process throughout the whole season, because you want that team to be ready, because finishing first might get you home field, but does nothing else for you. Okay, you still got to win the tournament. Like 2011 will always go to, first of all, 2011 was, after a great 2010 with all the programs, 2011 was just downright star-crossed, because men's lacrosse with Kevin Crowley and Jordan McBride got beat in the final second by Tom Compatella's brother, Hartford, in the final. Baseball with Nick Tropiano on the mound. He won his game. They didn't win another one. So, it's obvious that team went to Omaha the year after. It's the same lineup, minus Tropiano, no less. So anything can happen. But you want that team ready for the postseason. Regular season, okay, you play for your, to get in, and you play for your seeding. But every day, every game, you're building up for the playoffs.
And I think in baseball and softball, more than any other sport, is where the managers have so much leeway with some of their players, because they do play so many games, and you have an opportunity to get players on. You got an opportunity to get pitchers work, relievers work. And I think that's one of the best attributes, I think, for Coach Sank, that he has the ability to do that, kind of inject guys at the right time and kind of test them and see how long they can go. And I watched it today with Montgomery as well, too, where he, led up two runs in the fourth inning, with a home run with the wind blowing out into right field, that with a line drive that just kind of kept going. It was a shot, but I think the wind helped it a little bit as well, too. But he leaves him in there and lets him pitch for a little bit. And it's oh, well, let's see how you're going to react from this one there, young fella. And he puts him back in there to start the fifth as well, too. And I think that's quite a learning experience for a sophomore pitcher. to go through something like that. And I think that's what's great about the baseball and the softball, because, in the other sports, football, and then with, the lacrosse as well. The women's lacrosse is a little different because of how dominant they are. But when you're only playing 14 games, they matter so much. But when you're playing 45, doesn't matter. Not that it doesn't matter as much. They all matter, but you have opportunities in there to get more players.
Well, I even said so during the broadcast on Friday. I've said all the time. Everybody knows it's baseball 101. But, the one thing that I always like to do, especially when we're broadcasting on WUSB, is explaining certain things to people about baseball. And, yes, simple stuff that the seasoned veteran will know, but somebody who's turning on looking for democracy now probably won't. And one of them is that more so than any other sport, baseball requires large statistical samples to separate good from bad. You play 162 games in the major leagues because it's the only way you can sort out the top teams from the bottom, because the difference is 1 game in 5. Win 3 out of 5, you're playing 600 ball. Win 2 out of 5, you're playing 400 ball. But also, when I take a look, for example, when a new pitcher comes in, I'm looking at the stats, and the beauty of today's websites, and everybody's using the same infrastructure, that you can pull up a guy's name on the stat sheet, and you'll get all his outings. And I said, forget about a 7.60 ERA. I don't care about that. I want to see what he did his last 3 or 4 appearances.
Yeah, and I think it's you're saying is, and I always think in baseball as well too, especially with the pitcher, is how they react, right? How do they react? Not when the games. How do they react when they've been? How do they react when the game's on the line? How do they react after they've hit somebody? How do they react after somebody's hit a home run? Or how do they react after they've got an error?
Yeah,
right. So that costs them getting out of an inning. Right.
That's the beauty of these guys, though. And over the years, they don't. They're almost like they've got ice in their veins. You don't see a lot of, big reactions when something goes wrong. There is a little bit of a swagger about them, saying, "Okay, we'll get them in the bottom half of the inning. Whatever happens there. Anything they might." Throw gloves around and everything like that in private, doesn't happen on the field. And that is obviously something I'm sure the coaching staff, and led by Matt Sank, definitely puts into these guys that, this is the beauty of baseball. You have a bad inning, you got the next one.
Right, there's just so many turns in it as well, too. And I think that is one of the keys, I think, to being really, I think in my mind, like a really good pitcher. You have it on the inside, and whatever's boiling on the inside is boiling on the inside. But I think you have to look like you got ice in your veins, right? As when you step onto that mound, no matter what's going on, right? You just kind of like same routine, same thing, same. It's the pattern. It's almost like in basketball when you're on the foul line, right? You're on the foul line. It's the same routine every single time. That's how you get the same stroke.
Muscle memory.
Yes. Yep. And I just think attitude memory as well, too.
Seriously.
The same attitude.
Chris Mullin used to preach that all the time, and he's one of the greatest free throw shooters ever, college or NBA. But, yeah, he said muscle memory. You build up the muscle memory, and it becomes natural, and it becomes much more consistent. You change yourself around all the time, you're just going to mess up. And that, again, great coaching. Well, I don't wonder how. That's one thing I love to check out. When I have some free time, whether or not St. John's total free throw shooting improved under Mullen, but I bet it did. The baseball team here is, again, people are looking towards the future, looking towards next year, but they have, first of all, a lot of unfinished business this year. And, I'm just looking at, they took 2 out of 3 with Albany. And what's even funnier, and this tells you a lot about Albany too, is that the 2 wins were blowouts, and the loss was a close game, because that's the only kind of game Albany can win.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
now you got Binghamton. And Binghamton, I don't care what their record is going in. Okay, Binghamton's always a thorn in Stony Brook's side because when tournament time rolls around, they always have trouble getting past the two schools that they have the most trouble with, and who, of course, have consequently won the most American East championships other than Stony Brook since Stony Brook's been there, are Binghamton and Maine.
yeah, and they're obviously looking to get back into swing things just because they just recently they split. No, I think they lost the series against Hartford. They're coming off that, but they're gonna face probably in game two Gabe Driscoll, who had a tremendous performance against Hartford, where he struck out 15 hitters, which is a school record. So coming off a hot start like that, he's gonna carry that in obviously. And for Stony Brook, their offense, they're gonna have to avoid how they played this Saturday if they want to tag him up and get the win for that game.
Well, they got swept by Maine, dropped 2 out of 3 to UMass Lowell, dropped 2 out of 3 to Albany, and took 2 out of 3 from Hartford. And then they have a midweek game against Cornell, and then they get us. Then they come to us. And that is, we're going to be broadcasting that entire series.
The one thing I think is interesting with with those games as well too. Now how are you going to set up your pitching staff for next weekend? And are you going to throw your number one against their number one, or are you going to say, what do they perceive to be Stony Brook? Who would even be their number one right now if you were going to take a guess at that? And then do you go number one versus number one, or you try to rotate it where you're throwing two of your better pitchers not against their ace?
Yeah, I think just really, I would guess they'd go number one, number two, number three, and try to determine from there. Although really, to me, it's just like who their best pitchers are. It's definitely been in relief. Guys like Ben Farrell, Colton Book. Those two have had really good performances all season long, and it's the starters that have really I thought struggled. So for me, maybe just seeing how he performed today, you try to get someone like that, like maybe Josh O'Neill, to start for that game. He finished today's game and pitched 4 innings, only gave up 1 run and struck out 3. So, he's coming off a pretty good outing. To me, he's someone I would want to get on the roper for a lot of time.
What's interesting about the game today when you watch Quinlan Montgomery pitch, he was like a slow, methodical pitcher. And I thought when Josh O'Neill got in, he kind of picked up the pace of the game. And he was right back to throwing. And I thought the combination of the two of them, from one to the next, I thought that was that change of pace, I thought kind of like stunned Albany a little bit. I thought O'Neill pitched well. And obviously when Montgomery started, he was like throwing darts out there. I mean, he had 7 strikeouts. He looked fantastic. And then he started to lose some of his control.
He definitely lost it, I thought.
Yeah.
Second, third inning came up.
Yeah.
He was, I don't want to say he was gassed out, but he did not have a great outing, I thought, after that first inning.
Yeah. And I have to say, though, even in the first 2 or 3 innings, there were some pitches that he threw out there that was like, wow, where did that one come from? Mm-hmm. But he was still sharp enough to strike guys out. And I think Albany kind of looked lethargic to start off with. But then do you think to yourself, your coach saying, hey, the combination of those 2 guys out there look good today. Maybe that's something we go back to. Yeah, but maybe Montgomery only goes 4 innings next time.
I'd say it's the second straight week baseball's done that, because in the game against Hartford as well last Sunday, they did the same thing. So where they had Montgomery and then following him was O'Neill, or maybe even vice versa. But yeah, I think that's going to be something sticking forward. And that's probably going to be, I think, to me, the biggest change is, as opposed to maybe the past couple of years where, you had one pitcher, they'll go 6 innings or 7 innings, and you get a reliever, get Kyle Johnson in, and then you get your closer out. They're probably going to do that where they pair 2 or 3 guys together and, they essentially have an opener for 4 innings and then switch them with another reliever for another 3 or 4.
And I think that's really hard for that guy's almost like a mid reliever now, right? They're calling him. I think that is such a hard thing to do, is to be asked to, okay, you're going to have to jump in maybe in the 4th inning, maybe in the 5th inning. I can't imagine it's not, you're going to go 6 innings, so you kind of like, when do I start getting warmed up? What's going on here? You're kind of watching the pitcher? And I think for the starting pitcher, that becomes a little more difficult as well too when you start getting into the fourth and
Well,
fifth
I got
inning.
a crazier question. Who really is the closer on this team?
They really don't have one. It is technically, Brendan Patterman.
Patterman pitched 4 innings on Friday.
And that's the other thing too, right? They've used him in long relief, but just
he
in
closed
the
game, but he came on the 6th.
Right, that's the thing. Was he has 3 saves so far this season, but he's also pitched the most for non-starters. This is taking out Ben Farrow, Brandon Lashley. He has the third most innings.
30 innings, 30 and 2/3. Yep.
Yeah, and
Lashley only Farrow and Lashley have more. That's right.
Yeah. So technically he is the closer, but it's not like the closers of Stony Brook past where they were true closers. That's the thing with this rotation is they're like I said, they're still, I think they are still trying to figure out roles, or maybe they've just accepted that they're not going to have guys fulfill specific roles. If a guy could go out there and get 4 or 5 good innings, then they trust him enough to be a starter for game 2 of this week and game 3 next week, or something like that.
Well, remember too that this is not necessarily one of the better pitching staffs that Mets Yankees has had overall. It's been a jigsaw puzzle for him all the way through. They have a 6.01 ERA.
I was going to say, right, just looking at these guys and just guys with more than, a couple of appearances, and the ERAs are just ballooned up. Patterman, he's the closer, 2.35 ERA. That's the best. One guy.
That's over several innings. But again, with DeGennaro out, okay, and he went 9 2/3 and gave up 2 runs, which gives him a .93 ERA.
Yeah.
But the problem here is that Farrow's at 4.73 with 32 innings, and O'Neill is 5.04.
Yeah, we were talking about Montgomery today, right? And how he performed, had 7 strikeouts. He has a 5.73 ERA and gave up 4 of the 5 runs today.
Yeah.
It was O'Neill who had to come in, gave up a run, but finished the job. Both of them were above 5 in the ERA department. So
but that's where coaching comes into play. Get the right guys in the right situation. You're not necessarily going to have a go-to. You're going to have to mix things up a little bit, because then you take a look at the appearance and game started column, and you take a look at how many different guys have started games for the Seawolves. From Shane Helmstedt, who has 5 2/3 innings total, but he has 3 starts. Okay, 19.06 ERA. John Kiss has started 1. Kyle Johnson has started 2. Montgomery 3. Colton Book has started a couple. Brandon Lashley has started 5. Josh O'Neill has started 5. He came on relief. Andrew Ledbetter has started a game. Ben Farrow leads the team and starts with 6. Patterman hasn't started any because he's strictly a reliever. And DeGennaro had 2 starts before he went down. So, yeah, it has been a real mix to find out what's going to work, and then also be quick with the hook. The weird thing about Joe Nathan Field, among many, is they got the deep gaps, number one. And the second thing is that the home team bullpen is behind the right field fence. So the only way you can tell if there's activity going on is if you see a ball going back and forth. Mm-hmm. Can't see the pitcher. It's like, the door opens and see who comes out, but at least you can tell somewhat on the other side. But even then, they're too far away to read their numbers. But at least you know if he's a lefty or a righty. But on the Stony Brook side, pure guesswork. But when Matt Saint comes out there, you're checking that bullpen to see if there's a ball going back and forth. If there isn't one, he's coming back in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, looking at the roster, it's still a young roster, though, overall, when you look at it. They are really primed for, I think, a nice season next year. I think the question, Ken kind of, and Matt, moving forward, DeGennaro, does he come back next year? Does he get a red shirt and come back? Do Durkin, Giordano, and Farrow, now they're all seniors, but do they get another COVID year?
Right. And I believe they do. And really the question becomes, if they want to stay, if they want to transfer, which has happened to some seniors who have, who do graduate and have the year remaining. So it's definitely I think matter of if they want to come back, and, those guys, they haven't really had a bad season in there, but they've been among the better hitters for the squad.
But here's the other problem. And The other factor, of course, that gets involved is the draft. Now, will DeGennaro get drafted? I don't think he will off that injury. I think if he wants to get drafted, he may want to pitch another year in college.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's big for Stony Brook, too, because as we said, we looked at last year where it was fair last year and this year, and definitely in terms of pitching alone, right? They had tremendous pitching, starting pitching, and, they had Nick DeGennaro. I think he was 2 behind Jared Milch, who, pitched phenomenally last year for them, and Sam Turcotte as well. All 3 of those guys, I thought, made a case that they could be the number 1 starter. For this year, he was the clear number 1 starter until he went down. And, we're already midway through April. There's about 5 weeks left of the season. And, they're looking at the roster. There's really no one there where you feel comfortable saying, yeah, that guy's the true number 1. And, you just look at each series and it's a different number 1 starter for them each game. So, or each series. So,
you know what, though?
It's big. It's big for this team to get him back.
Ask any coach. And he's going to tell you that you ask any coach, what was your favorite team in some cases, and they'll often they'll talk about the good teams, but they'll also talk about the most challenging teams. I mean, you have a team here with a 9-3 conference record. Okay, so they are a legitimate threat if they were in the tournament to win it. And look at the hodgepodge of a pitching staff they have, and you're thinking it's going to take a hell of a coaching job to win that.
I would say for folks that think we're overreacting, as of right now, just this season, this team has an ERA of 6.01. So think about that. They're giving up over 6 runs on average per game. Their opponent's only giving up about 4.9. But offensively, as we said, this team has done a really good job averaging about 260 as a whole, 765 OPS. Slugging wise, they're batting above 400. So this is a team that can definitely get on base and really find ways to get home.
There's better news, though. And the better news is, and again, I love these stat sheets because you can switch between overall and conference. And with the America East teams, all of them, okay, not just Stony Brook, they all go down south. They all play against power conference teams. They all get beat up. So you isolate the conference record, looks a hell of a lot better. Okay, 5.18 instead of 6.01. Your ERA, which is still not great.
But it's not a lot better. It is better.
It is better, but yeah.
Kind of goes to show more just the weakness of the conference.
All of a sudden, Colton Book's ERA in conference is 2.7. Josh O'Neill's is an even 3. Okay. Devin Sharkey's at 3.86. Montgomery's at 6.32. And Farrow's at 6.75. And those 2 guys are starters. That's a concern.
Yep.
But Patterman's down to 2.16, which also shows you how well he performed in non-conference play because there's not a dramatic difference. No. But a lot of these guys look a lot better when you look at the conference records.
And to go back to your point for Coach Sank and, the ability to maybe enjoy this kind of a season in a weird way, although it might be causing some more white hairs, I listened to Bobby Bowden one time give a speech, and he was saying, what gets you really excited is not when great players play great. You just expect that to occur. It's when you have a guy that comes in and has to perform, and you didn't expect them to play, and then somebody got injured or something happened, and then all of a sudden they get forced into the action. And they don't play great, but they play well enough for you to win. And in the conference right now, that's what you're seeing with the pitching.
Absolutely. Not just pitching, the whole team. I think.
The whole team, yeah, they're playing well enough to win, and that gets you excited. And I think you use that to your advantage a little bit. I think that becomes your mantra as a team, right? Is we're gonna do it together. We're gonna stick in it together, and whatever comes our way, we kind of face it and we move forward, and whatever happens.
And it's, as you said, those new faces, right? Like last week, Matt Brown Aaron, past couple weeks, Matt Brown Aaron, as those really stepped it up in non-conference play. This week, Brett Polson was silent in non-conference play. They lost 9-2 Manhattan. Really, most of the team was silent, but wasn't doing much. This weekend had a great weekend. Got on base like all 3 games. The past couple, he had a big role in Friday's win when they won 12-3. Today, right, freshman David Oliva, he really provided the spark in that 6th inning to where the Stony Brook was able to score 7 runs to close out the game, including 5 in that 6th inning alone, where he was able to just crush that first pitch he saw and give Stony Brook the lead with that. And he's a guy, he's a freshman who, quiet for a lot of non-conference play, and now he's starting to find his swing. And he's one of those new guys, as we said, who he could really set himself up well, Greg.
And he roped it. Mm-hmm. He really did. He got a hold of it, and you know what? The wind was blowing out that into the right field, and then sometimes it was pushing, out to the right, but almost like it would have blown the ball out of foul. And I was kind of looking at it, thinking, he hit it, and I was like, "Ooh, that's going to stay in." And that was about 6 or 7 feet in from the foul line. But with the wind blowing in the wrong direction, that could have been pushed. But he really got a hold of that ball. It was one of the better hits today that I saw.
That was only an RBI single, brought 2 home, and gave them that lead doing a relinquish. But we spoke to him after the game, and he said, the pitcher was beating him off the changeup all game. So he adjusted to that after striking out twice to it and knew he was going to get that pitch again. And it kind of goes to show, again, that growth, these players. And as I said, a guy like Olivo, to where, he knew he was getting beat, so he adjusted to it. That third time through, he was able to get a lot of barrel on the bat. And as a result, he was a big part in changing the game and the complexion of it to where Stony Brook rode off with the win and looked real strong those final few innings. And that's what you want to see, especially as they get ready to move on to a tougher conference where you're going to need a lot of games like that in CAA.
Well, Oliva is a perfect example of a guy who's grown over the course of the season because, he was down, buried at the bottom of the lineup. And even though he was the DH, he's batting under 200. Well, in conference, again, small statistical samples, he's up around 240 now. I mean, he's still 196 overall, but he's swinging the hot bat. He had a great weekend because he did get a couple of hits. Did get a big hit on Friday, but that just, again, part of the whole developmental process. Again, isolating those conference games, Brett Paulson's batting 400 in conference. Evan Giordano is batting 391, and Shane Paradine's batting 380.
They're always great, though, so, yeah.
Yeah. So
but you love to hear that kind of comment from Oliva, though, because it's like then he's in taking coaching. He's thinking about it. He's watching the game. Do you know what I'm saying? It's that whole learning thing. He's a student of the game, and that's what you like to hear. I think that's a great point, Ken, that when you brought that up there.
But those are the type of guys that Matt Sank loves the most. He loves to recruit those guys. Everybody. I mean, take a look at a guy like we'll go straight to a Stony Brook major leaguer, Travis Jankowski. How has he lasted in the major leagues this long with not a great bat?
He's got pretty good speed. He was all those weeks stealing some bases.
Good speed, great fielding, great base running, great fundamentals. Now, if his bat ever picked up pace, he'd be a starter. But somebody always wants him, and now he's a Met.
Well, he's going to play a boatload for the Mets this year with their outfield situation, and the fact that he's a defensive specialist, I think, as well too. You're going to see him kind of, I think, in the later innings of games be put in right after that bat has been pushed around, and that speed as well too. So I think the combination of the two, just that defensive specialist, I don't know. I think he's going to fit right in for the Mets. I think he's going to have a big year for him. Well, maybe not statistically, but I think he's going to make a lot of big plays.
Here's another problem, though. He would be better off. As a matter of fact, he's played most of his career in the National League with the Padres and so forth. But with the DH now, no more double switching. Now you're making a conscious effort to improve your defense in the late innings, which means you're pulling a hitter out. And, you can't move anybody around. So it's going to be interesting what kind of action he sees because, like you said, he was, first of all, drafted by the Padres to patrol Petco Park and their spacious outfield. And he seems to be the type of player that fit into the National League scheme, the old National League scheme, very well. But how does he now fit when they do have a DH? That's going to be interesting, too. That's going to be a lot of players like that. The National League was a haven for them, just like the American League was for the guys, for the Edgar Martinez's of the world who got injured and couldn't field anymore but could hit.
Yeah, but I think it's going to see the DH in the National League now. I think it's going to play havoc on pitching as well, too. So I think that's going to change things as well, too. Is he going to be able to see some some pitches maybe that he's going to be able to hit because the pitch is going to be a little more exhausted as the game goes on.
Okay, it's 11 o'clock. You're listening to WUSB Stony Brook, the sports section. And we do have to remind our sports listeners, because we have not been doing that great a job of it during the games, and we'll be doing that from this point forward, that most of you who listen to sports on WUSB listen to only sports on WUSB. That's okay. I mean, we do wish you'd leave the radio on after the game is over or before it starts to listen to the music and other programming we have here. But the important thing is, though, that even if you only listen to sports, we still need your support during Radiothon. And Radiothon, of course, it is the semi-annual fundraiser. We do 2 of these a year. And I shouldn't say slightly more than half the funding comes from the undergraduate student government. The rest of it that WUSB needs to operate comes from the listeners. And that's why we make the appeal. And that gives us, first of all, the opportunity to keep our bills up to date, like rental on the transmitter tower and maintenance and phone bills and things like that. Fortunately, we're not charged rent. But also, we moved into a brand new studio 5 years ago, and that requires some maintenance as well. That's why originally we were not doing radiothons in the early days of the station at all until we had to buy a new transmitter, and nobody else was going to fund it unless we went to the listeners. That's what we did. Well, we need to constantly update our equipment. Our transmitter is ancient. But these are the things that, and again, we have an automation system we need to buy. We're going to you, because we can't beg the undergraduate student government for any more than they're giving us, because they've got, everybody on campus has their hand out, and they have line budgets for different clubs like you wouldn't believe. So can't depend on them. We depend on you. So make a pledge. Go to wusb.fm/pledge, or just go to the main website and see the menu on the left and pledge. Best way to do it. I mean, yes, you can call us, but I'm going to ask, you want to talk on the air? And besides which, I'm too busy talking now. I can't take your call. So go to and pledge online, and make sure you mention the sports section or the games or something like that, and put a little feedback in there to keep doing it, because I know that we get the feedback when we go to the games. We say, keep them going, or why don't you do this game, or stuff like that. We get that all the time. But the important thing is that we know you're there. You know and if you're listening to us now, you know we're here. And nobody, and forget about America East TV, forget about ESPN Plus, forget about Flow Sports, nobody brings you the Seawolves like we do, because nobody talks about the Seawolves the way we're talking about them now. No other news source on the planet talks about the Seawolves as extensively as we do. So that in itself is worth making a pledge. So go ahead. Okay.
Plus the big thing too, just helping with funding, helping to broadcast department and student broadcasters help get their experience to grow, especially by them increasing opportunities for them to cover games, like road games for lacrosse, which we're going to talk about right now.
We are building opportunities for people. I mean, I'm extremely proud of what, for example, Jim Furchel and Zach Wilson are achieving right now, doing a lot of freelance work in the area, and other people will be following behind them as well. And they're doing that. Yes, they went to Stony Brook for journalism, but the journalism department didn't get those gigs for them. They went out and got them themselves, but they learned here. There are no classes for sports broadcasting, at least not yet, at Stony Brook University. If you want to learn how to broadcast a game, you got to join WUSB. And yes, you might be able to get, some TV work on America East TV, but you'll probably get, soccer. You won't get the marquee sports. You won't get the big events. That you do here. And not only that, I personally believe, and one of the reasons why I've been here so long, is that you really learn how to broadcast a game when you're doing it on the radio.
Yeah, there was a lot of broadcasts, like lacrosse this weekend with a doubleheader. They do it yearly now, and there was some fun stuff going on for both the men and women's programs.
Yeah, well, let's start off with the men. Now, again, we're doing the same thing as far as the at-large bid is concerned. Highly unlikely, because the non-conference schedule was such that There may have been a chance if the Seawolves had won a couple of those games, but unfortunately they did not. But they still, of course, can compete for the regular season title. They pull out a win at Dartmouth by 1 goal, and anytime you beat an Ivy, it's good. NJIT, team that has not won all year, and this is something that I talked about during both games. Less so NJIT because, yes, if Stony Brook was ranked, NJIT, you had to score 20 goals on them. And women and New Hampshire, they had scored 20 goals on them. So the important thing here is that when you're doing that and when you're de facto independent, you can't just win against weak teams. You got to maul weak teams. And Stony Brook, they had a good game. Everybody overall had a solid game. Offensive explosion here, as is described on StonyBrookAthletics.com. But they're now
different goal scorers.
7-4 and 2-1. The wealth was spread. 11 goal scorers, and 7-point game for Dylan Palinetti. And Palinetti again is learning more and more when the right time is to take matters into his own hands.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's looked great, and Greg, I would say his attacking is just phenomenal.
Yeah, he just is a difference maker. When he has the ball in his stick, he's going to command attention and he's going to force a slide. And when they move the ball around, they share it. He really can make it. It just cause problems defensively for teams. And you saw that against Dartmouth, and you saw it yesterday against NJIT as well too, where they really just shared the wealth. The offense, to be honest with you, is really not the problem here for Stony Brook. I think defensively, you let up 13 against Dartmouth and you let up 12 against NJIT. And they just don't seem to have the ability to shut down a marquee player from another team. And I think that's been their problem. They're getting good goaltending. I think Anthony Palmer is excellent. I really like the way that he plays. He saves the defense a lot of times. Otherwise, the stat would be a little worse. Renz Conlon usually
only played in the first half, by the way.
Sounds like the Rangers are just Storkins during the season. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, usually really good from the face-off acts, and then it can score as well too. But it just doesn't seem like they're able to shut a team down the way that you want them to. I mean, you score 20 goals, and that's nice, but you let up 5 goals against them in the first quarter, a 5-5 first quarter against NJIT, and I don't think that is, in my mind, acceptable. To be honest with you. I'd like to see some improvement with that.
And I think it's a fair analysis critique just because, again, we're this late in the season. It's not like it's week 2. There's only about a month left of regular season, of your season. And, as you said, a team in NGIT that has struggled scoring. And you only have 56 goals on the season entirely. That's the least amount.
Yeah, Stony Brook scored 3 times as many.
Yeah, exactly. Stony Brook leads the conference in scoring.
But here's
overall.
another thing. Okay, talking about the face-offs, and again, this goes back to that Albany game where they couldn't buy one. Okay, Renz Conlon, and a move was made by Anthony Gallardi after this. Renz Conlon, 2 for 8. Austin Deskowitz, 15 for 24.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this about Renz Conlon, and good for Austin Deskowitz because he's been on the team for quite some time and never really got to be that marquee face-off guy for them. Yep. And then Renz Conlon comes in and he kind of gets, and
11 ground balls.
Yeah, kind of gets sidestepped there. So he has himself a really nice day. He's got, the hot hand. The one piece I don't love about Conlon is he's super aggressive. He plays really hard, but I think that leads him to make some careless errors and
he made
penalties.
One. He got a penalty, and I think that was one of the reasons why he got pulled. But Deskowitz was effective. The main reason why Conlon stayed off the field because Deskowitz was effective.
Yeah, and I think that anytime you take somebody off the field when you put the replacement, and if they don't play well, then what are you going to do now?
Yeah.
Right. But I would agree with that. I just think he just kind of they may be effort plays, they may be, but I think he's got to learn that aspect of the game. I think Ren's Conlon, that'll make him a superstar faceoff, Fogo or faceoff taker or whatever, if he has the ability to do that. And then, like you said, offensively, they just have the ability to score. You know, they're going to force you to play defense. I really like the way Kevin Mack plays. He's very shifty behind.
Great pickup for some.
Yeah. And you know what? And we've been kind of slamming that America East thing, but it's a shame that he comes here and isn't going to be able to play in the America East tournament, because I think he could have a real nice tournament, because he's the type of player in the tournament situation that can really shine, because you don't get the game plan as much in these tournaments. It's the second time you're playing every team. You know what they do. They know what you do. So now it's about kind of your playmakers, right? And if you throw a wrinkle out, you can only throw a wrinkle out early in the first game. And if it doesn't go, then you're just playing straight up after that. You know, so I think he's the kind of guy that could really, really flourish. So, but I mean, he's still having obviously a nice career, just not going to be able to have that opportunity to play in the conference.
Well, I gave NJIT a lot of credit on two aspects of their game. Number one, Liam Brown and goal had 9 saves in the first half. That's one. And number two, yes, their face-off guys were very, very good. I mean, obviously, it's a team that's in development and can't score, and but the whole point is they've got two big aspects of their game under control. So, you know, they're on their way. That's a good sign. Palma, actually, in this case, both teams played two different goalies in first and second half, which I found interesting. Nick Squicciarini played in the second half. But at this point also, because we're going to because this will be a point when we bring up, when we talk about the women, when you're in a game like this, and yes, if you're worrying about rankings, you do have to beat weak teams by a lot. But where do you pull, and where do you take your foot off the gas? I mean, in the fourth quarter, an NJIT still had their starters out there, but Stony Brook, basically pulled everybody. And they're running the second string out there, or the freshmen, and everybody, getting some game action in. And a lot of the goals that were scored in the fourth quarter were scored by guys like Liam Kalbacher and let's see who else. No, even Estrella got a goal in. Jovinko on a man up, but you had a bunch of guys who would not necessarily see the light of day in a tighter game, that got some work in, which is good. But how does that reflect necessarily when the rankings come out again? Stony Brook again is not the men are not really in that situation, but the women definitely are, and they were yesterday.
Before we move to the women, and I definitely want to do that, one of the players that I'm really excited about, who's had 2 nice games in a row, and I think he had a nice game on Saturday as well too, was Will Button, the attackman from Bayshore.
That's another thing we have to bring up too, because you see the lines moving around a little bit. Button getting a started attack.
Yeah, and I really think it's I think it's important. He's Ken, you were talking about earlier with with the baseball team and getting guys in and getting them opportunity to play. He kind of got sidestepped a little bit because of what occurred with Kevin Mack coming in. How can you not play Kevin Mack? But now, you can't not have Button ready to go for next year. He has a nice goal against Dartmouth, and then he's got 2 points here against NJIT. You're looking for him to have a strong finish to the year, but I think that's a nice setup for him, kind of like moving forward right now.
But here's the question. I mean, yeah, it was a great opportunity to run Button out there and see what he can do. Because remember, this is a team that had not won all year, and Stony Brook should have no trouble with, and really didn't have that much trouble with them, other than on the faceoffs. But Button getting a start at attack, okay. Armitage not in the starting lineup at all, okay, because Button took his place. Wayne White has been moved off the top line. At least yesterday he was. They put Pearson on the one line. Okay, White got minutes, no doubt about it. Even got an assist, but DeMayo picked up 2 assists. I didn't see him around there that much. Armitage, despite not starting, got 2 goals and an assist. So moving things around, and it seemed like you can make the argument. And again, we get a chance to talk to Coach Gallardi about this. We should ask him. Is that was this kind of like a midweek baseball game? When you're running relievers out as starters and see what they can do.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. They've had an interesting schedule, right? They didn't have a game last week. Then they play Tuesday, Saturday, and then they don't play again until Binghamton. I believe until Binghamton next week. So, and then I think Binghamton, even though they're 2-0 in the conference, they're 4-5 overall. So I think it's another opportunity to play some other guys and see how they do. So I think you're going to continue to see this this setup here, right? And I also think what it does do as the season rolls on is it increases the tempo of practice when you get other guys an opportunity to play, right? It's gonna raise the enthusiasm level at practice because, right now, Stony Brook's not going to make the playoffs. It's not going to happen. It's not even a chance. I don't think it's going to occur.
No at large, you mean?
No at large. It's not going to happen. So how do you finish off the last 3 weeks of the season here?
Well, you play Vermont in the final at home in the final game of the season, so that's always an incentive. Because I'm looking at Vermont's schedule, okay, and even some of the losses they've had. Okay, they lost 15-7 to Duke to open up the season. Then they lost by a goal to Utah. Then they lost by a goal to Brown. They lost by a goal to Dartmouth. They lost by 2 to Providence, 2 to UMass, and those are all their losses. And they've won 4 in a row since. And nobody has scored more than 9. As a matter of fact, that was UMass Lowell scored 9. UMBC, who is surprising and how not so good they've been, they scored only 3 off Vermont. And Canisius 6 and NJIT 3. So they had a 14-3 win against NJIT, which is more like the type of win you expected from Stony Brook yesterday. But I also think a lot of it had to do. NJIT scored more goals against Stony Brook than they have against any other team. Okay, but a lot of that came in garbage time. So
yeah, that's a fair point, Matt.
Yeah, and Vermont didn't take their foot off the gas with NJIT. Clearly, I mean, they only allowed 3 goals. So, was that necessarily mean? Nothing. Counts the same in the standings.
Yeah. It's a little ego there, I think, defensively, if you're coaching the defensive group.
But, again, the schedule was set up because of who they anticipated would be the top 2 teams in the conference would be Vermont and Stony Brook. And that's why that last game, you remember when the football team was in the Big South and we'd get Liberty at the final game of the season, and the final game of the season always decided first place?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's kind of like this is.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think for the men here, there's an opportunity to get the regular season championship, and that's what they should be hunting for right now. And there's no reason why they can't do it, right? If they win out their next 3 games, which they're certainly capable of doing, right? They can definitely beat Binghamton. They can definitely beat UMBC. And in the last game of the season, you're playing Vermont, and that's an opportunity to win. I don't think Vermont is so dominant this year that they can't compete. It's not like the Vermont basketball team, right, where they were just so dominant, like how you even match up against them. I don't think that's going to be the case at all. And with the offensive firepower that they have, they can really match offensively against anybody.
I was going to say, for me, the interesting thing for that Stony Brook Vermont game would be it's an inverse to where, to me, Stony Brook has a tremendous offense and their defense is lax. For Vermont, their defense is phenomenal, one of the best in the country. But offensively, it's, as you said, it's about on pars with Stony Brook. And we've seen in the past, both low-scoring games and high-scoring games, but more importantly, 1-goal games between the Seawolves and the Catamounts in men's lacrosse. And it's been those coin flips. And
think of this.
Gone in favor of Vermont the past 3 times, but as you said, it could be anyone's game.
That 15-7 loss to Duke, that was the most goals they allowed all year. They have not allowed more than 12 since. And those the 1-goal loss to Brown and 2-goal losses to Providence and UMass, they allowed 12. That's the most they've allowed.
Yeah.
But it also means if they allow double figures, they will lose. That's what it seems to be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a
You
tough
know,
thing to do
And
because
with the
especially
exception of Dartmouth,
defensively.
which was 8-7.
But just think defensively, they do a good job of just holding opponents to under 30% shooting, which is something Stony Brook struggled with the past few weeks.
Yeah,
The last
their
month,
shooting accuracy this year
we
overall has
I'm
not been,
yeah,
not been typical Stony Brook. Stony Brook
yeah,
is their shooting used to be leading up to this year much more accurate.
yeah. For UMBC, they only shot 8% on the afternoon as a whole. That's why they only scored three
right?
times.
Jeez. Yeah, that's
Right.
almost like an unheard of number for that.
For
But
NJIT, they only shot 9%. Greg.
yeah, but I mean, those numbers are just so abysmal. It's like it's like not even. Ugh, you don't even say that again.
It's about with the women's defense for Stony Brook
Yeah,
to
no.
give up. Yeah.
So, I do think it's time to switch over to the women and talk about what they're doing, right, Ken?
Yeah, and they would just continue to go on a roll. And this week, winning 20-6, as you said, they kind of had to score 20 just to maintain a top 10 spot, and they're probably going to do that. So they've been on a roll, winning the past 6 games in a row.
Well, we were talking about this. I had Anthony Leon with me. He called the women's game. We flipped. I did the men. He did the women, and we were talking. I was talking about this in particular because at one point they were up like 18-3. Okay, and at one point, number one, when does Joe Spallina take his foot off the gas? And it was even worse. It was no, it was 18-2. Sorry, 18-2 going into the fourth quarter, and New Hampshire outscored Stony Brook 4-2, largely because that's when you take your foot off the gas and bring in the mass substitutions. 20-6 the final, and New Hampshire was not even close to being in this game. And New Hampshire scored 20 goals against somebody earlier in the season.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real, mind bender there, because you take a look. Okay, I'm just going to open up New Hampshire schedule here, and there it is, staring right at you. They scored 20 goals on. It was Central Connecticut State, but still, it shows you they're capable. Okay, they beat They scored 12 against UMass Lowell, and then just gave up 20 in 2 straight games. Gave up 20 to Albany and 20 to Stony Brook. But they've scored 14 on Albany and only managed 6 against Stony Brook, and really only 3 in the first 3 quarters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to me, I thought this was their best shooting game of the season, just because it felt like everything they shot went in, and they shot something like 60% almost as a team, and just offensively, it was there, and it was a big reason why they got that win. Obviously, too, holding opponents 6 points, defense, one of the best in the nation, limiting what UNH could do. But goaltending, too, I thought it was an interesting story, Greg. You have both goaltenders out there, Halsall start and Campbell in the second half.
Yeah, I think you keep them both happy, and it's actually after Campbell, she was just a player of the week last week as well too.
Halsall, yeah.
I mean, also player of the week. So I mean, it's that embarrassment of riches. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you play him and see who's going to be the hot hand? It's a long season, and you hate to say it, but like these games are not going to be. They're not going to be contested here, right? Stony Brook is going to kind of roll. So I think it's an opportunity to get them both work. But here's what I will say, in my opinion, when you start to put some of the reserves in for the women's team, the reserves offensively can still pack a punch.
Oh yeah.
The reserves defensively, they're still not up to understanding, I think, that trapping / quick doubling defense that Joe Spallina likes to run. So when they're in there, they tend to make some mistakes that leaves players open and giving them an opportunity to shoot. And if you want to, as a coach as well too, maybe you're bouncing your goaltenders around to get them a little work, because in the second half it's going to be you're going to get some more opportunities to make some saves.
Yeah, and again, that was an interesting thing too, right? With Halsall, she has less starts than Campbell this season, but she started the past. Let me see here, last 2 games with Arizona State, and then the first half, 3 games actually with Princeton, and then Arizona State, and then the first half against UNH. And for Campbell, they picked up against Vermont and then UNH. So, and for Campbell, they've had to make more saves than also this so far these past few games because, as you said, of that. Also surrendered more goals because of it. But yeah, it's been interesting seeing those roles flip from the start of the season.
Yeah, I was, kind of surprised at that as well too. But I think he's playing this one close to the vest, and I don't think people are really calling him to task on it either. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't think
Yeah,
anybody
yeah,
has really kind of like put him on the mark and said, "So what are you doing with your goalies here?" Like
right.
it's kind of like it's been working, and
That's
then
that's the
might
big thing,
not.
right? They're combined. They're 9-2, so it's not really going to matter up until NCAA quarterfinals if they make it there. It's like, all right, who are you going to start, Campbell or Halsell?
Yeah, and the goaltending, and I haven't seen it at all on the sidelines. Sometimes when goalie can be like a starting quarterback in football,
Mhm.
where all
It's their
suddenly,
spot. Yeah,
yeah, but suddenly everybody's rooting for the backup on the team to come out and play. And I think a goalie could be like that as well too. But I haven't seen that at all from the team. Anytime they play, whoever goes in, they play hard for, they're cheering for, and both goalies seem to not have any animosity towards each other.
yeah,
You
quite.
know, you, you don't see one of them pouting on the sideline when the other one's going in. They're cheering for each other. They're kind of right around each other. So, real good team atmosphere going on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just going to continue too, because we don't see Stony Brook already have 56 straight wins in conference play, and no one seems up to the task. I mean, UMass Lowell, Stony Brook just has a tremendous history of just mopping the floor against them. They won 20-4 last time out back in March of 2021, and they've scored at least 20 each of the 6 games they played against UMass Lowell. So expect them to drop 20 more on them coming up this week.
It's almost comical to look at the America East standings and see Albany in first place with a 3-0 record, right?
Half a game. Games in hand mean nothing unless you win them. But you know what, though? Okay, just like we were talking about, final game of the year, Stony Brook, Vermont on the men, Stony Brook, Albany on the women. Because interestingly enough, even though they're 5-6 overall, Albany has had some nice wins. Okay, they destroyed Colgate 19-2, lost by 2 to Yale, who Stony Brook plays later, lost by 4 to Hofstra. Drexel beat them pretty good. They stomped on Canisius by 5, lost by 5 to UConn, beat Binghamton, lost by 5 to Cornell. Okay, they're not on Stony Brook's level, and that's the other thing. Okay, I even drew the parallel Stony Brook versus Kansas in men's basketball. Stony Brook Women's Lacrosse is a power conference school playing in a mid-major conference, which is one of the reasons why they've constantly gotten snubbed on seedings. Other things like the bathroom laws in North Carolina and some other goofy stuff, you forget about that. The main reason why they keep getting snubbed is because of the weak conference they play in. And it seems like the real season's being played in the beginning of the season,
Right.
and
the end of the season, is warm up for the tournament.
It's extended training for the real competition, like Rutgers or Drexel or JMU,
Yeah.
like we've seen in the past few years, or
But-
UNC, Syracuse, etc.
And what they're also doing, too, is, and that's why I said during the broadcast yesterday, if they don't stomp on this team, they're going to go down in the rankings. It's nasty, and if you're on the receiving end of it, you pay a nasty price for it. But it also happens in basketball when you get blown out by 30 against Kansas. If Kansas doesn't blow you out by 30, they don't stay at number 1,
Well, people begin to question what's going on in Kansas.
Right.
So,
Right,
Florida this year.
I still remember, that was like, second or third year in D1. We were still an independent, okay? We play UConn at the Hartford Civic Center. We broadcast the game, Jeff, Kurt, and myself, okay? And Stony Brook plays with them. They stay with them the whole game, end up losing by 9. And this is right on the heels of a national championship. As a matter of fact, were they defending national champions or 2 years removed? They wound up in the NIT that year. They were top 10 when Stony Brook faced them. And you have to wonder how much of an effect it had on them.
Yeah, because the conversation around it is, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And you might not even be thinking.
And the fans were, you could feel it. The place is packed. Remember, Hartford Civic Center and NHL Arena, okay, they holds 17,000, 18,000, And I didn't, they go UConn, UConn, kind of like JETS. I didn't hear that until 2 minutes left in the second half, when UConn pretty much had opened up enough of a lead to give the fans some confidence they were going to win. Because they were shocked. That was a year we had Leon Bridgeport. I think we went like 18-10 because we beat Army. We beat a couple of good teams as an independent. And Bridgeport was a transfer from Providence. So he was a Big East player. He was legit. And that was the year we played UConn within 9, and they were just off a national championship. So, try a school like UMass Lowell doing that to Villanova now.
Right.
Yeah, two things on that. I think one thing when you talk about with the UConn thing, and one of the things you can do as a coach when you have a team that's really an average team, but you're a traditional powerhouse, is that tradition can get average players to play great, and not even because they don't even know that they're not great because they're playing for UConn.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And until somebody points out that they're not great, it's kind of like, well, what do you mean I'm not great? I play for UConn, right?
I made the team here. Now, St. John's had that cachet and no longer has it.
Right.
Okay.
For sure.
But definitely did way back in the day, especially still back then, around the turn of this current century.
Sure.
In 2000, they won the Big East and got to the Elite Eight. Okay, on Fran Fraschil's players, but that's another story. But they had Ron Artest, world peace on that team. So they were pretty damn good. But of course, Ohio State was just a little bit better. The whole point still is that, you play a team that tough, and they came to us the very first Division I game. They came to the indoor sports complex. That team that went to the Elite Eight that year came and played Stony Brook. Bootsy Thornton, Anthony Glover, Eric Barkley. I remember that team vividly. Because the last really good St. John's team.
Yeah, right. Now, Ken, let me throw a name out at you, and let me see if it's a good analogy for you. The women's lacrosse team, are they like the men's Gonzaga basketball team?
Ooh.
Good point. You know what, though? I will throw another wrench into that. Look at St. Mary's, who plays in the same conference as Gonzaga.
Okay.
When Gonzaga first started reaching national prominence, they were absolutely like the women, that they were a strong team playing in a weak conference. The conference got better because now St. Mary's is going in the NCAA with them.
Right. It's become a two-bid conference, right?
Yeah.
But don't you think that is kind of has that feeling now? Gonzaga has kind of, it's not surprising that they don't need to go undefeated to get a high seed, and I think that's the women should be like that now as well too.
I think it is equivalent, and I think a big part of it too is that, like Gonzaga, there's no national championships, despite how good Gonzaga's been in men's basketball and how good Stony Brook's been in women's lacrosse. There's no championships there.
Look how long it took Jim Boeheim to win one. Come on,
right? Exactly. No, that's the thing. I think it makes a great precedent for that, where they have, at least in women's lacrosse, they definitely have that. I think that resume, and that's why too, even in America East competition, they're not going to fall off too far. Like, I really don't see them being below 10. At worst, they'll probably be a 7, somewhere in 7 to 9 range. That's really the interesting thing to me, is will they be penalized for not winning the conference championship? Will they get dropped down to a 9? Well, they get dropped down to a 9 spot more so than anything else.
If they don't win first of all, they don't win the conference championship. Well, let's say, for example, if they lose a game in the America East, it might cost them an at-large.
Not even that. I'm just saying more that not going in, not being conference champions. Will that knock them down to 9? Really, the only difference for that would be that they're going to be playing on the road a lot more than they have in the past couple of years. But
now, Ken, do you think that this team, and Matt as well too, I guess, you guys think is this team good enough to do it?
Win it all?
Yeah.
You know what? Again, turn back the clock 10 years. I just talked about the 2011 baseball team versus the 2012. And the 2011 on paper was better because they had Nick Tropiano in the starting rotation. Only problem was they couldn't get out of the America East tournament because Nick Tropiano was the only one who won a game. So with the superstars that they've had in the past, we thought they had what it took. Okay, with the old Millers, with Courtney Murphy, with Allie Kennedy, that they had what it took. I still think they got the shaft, especially in that game when Allie Kennedy got 2 yellow cards. But the beyond that, okay, sometimes it isn't always the best team on paper that goes all the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Is
That this team may actually be better balanced than the previous teams. Because when we talk about picking your poison, you take a look at the box scores day in, day out, and different people stepping up at different times, and not one
this weekend,
go-to person like you had with them, Courtney Murphy. Okay.
Yeah. This weekend was Morgan Mitchell. She had a career day, 5 goals on Saturday's game.
Yeah.
And that's another attacker right there.
Now, again, you're playing a team that really, the New Hampshire, I have to keep reminding myself, no matter how bad Stony Brook made New Hampshire look, New Hampshire's not that bad.
Oh, right. You got to almost convince yourself that that's the case.
Right.
But you look at you look at the team, Ken. What do you think?
To me, it's just really tough because of, teams like North Carolina who are undefeated and, coming off, I forget it was a finals appearance or a Final Four appearance for sure. Obviously Boston College, Syracuse, those teams, it's just such a coin flip once you're up to the top. Even Duke, who are 13-1, it's such a coin flip once you get up to those top 5 or 6 teams, that it comes down to, as you said, the calls and also just how they close out games. Because in those, Elite 8 Final Four matchups, the team, Stony Brook could have had a lead going into the fourth, but they just gas seems to run out, or their team just makes better adjustments and is able to, even if they're not winning the entire game, they're able to leave with the win when you feel like it was a game Stony Brook had in hand entering the fourth. So
that's one of the reasons why I think they got the shaft from the officials, because I personally think, and again, Greg, this is something that you probably were witness to as you were, going through your entire lacrosse career from, juniors to high school to college, that especially back then, and 10 years before that, even more so, that there was an establishment, that there was, your Hopkins and your Syracuse and nobody else. And the same, I think, is applied with women's lacrosse. You had your established programs, you had your Northwesterns, and you had your Ivies, and you had and other schools. And again, it's all because of this big NCAA tournament pie that even Stony Brook upgraded 20 plus years ago. But not just that, I still remember 20 years ago when Hofstra left the CAA, it was left to go to the CAA. The CAA didn't have an automatic qualifier, I think, that year because they didn't have enough teams. Stony Brook gets the automatic qualifier, and the Hofstra fans are saying, we had a better record than they did. We got shafted. Okay. Stony Brook's in the NCAA, and we're not. And of course, the Stony Brook people are saying, yeah, because only a few years before, the Hofstra voted to blackball us out of the America East. Literally, one vote, keep us out.
Yeah,
so
make next year rivalries a lot of fun.
Yeah.
My question with the team though, for the women is just, I think it's gonna. My guess is because they got the goaltending, they got the scoring. Draw controls, is that going to be a question?
Yeah, but even then,
what though?
To me, it's just from what we've seen in the losses they've had so far this season, it's just been offenses scoring more, obviously, but really the biggest difference was just defenses shutting down the offenses for Stony Brook. And, those players who score in bunches, like Massera, like Hart, like Rafferty, not really scoring at that same level. And that's always been the difference in these sort of games. It's just been the other defenses have hung on and stuck hard against the Stony Brook attack harder than the Seawolves do defensively.
Yeah,
you know what, guys?
The one thing that I think you bring up a good point, Matt, earlier though, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but you were right with Ohlmiller and Kennedy and such, but without that, they've really shared the wealth a lot more this year, right? So you don't have to stop one person, and then if they do stop one person, then all of a sudden it seems like Rafferty's open on the inside, right? And she's getting some points, and somebody else can get some points, I mean, you're going to have Massera and you're going to have Hart, right? And they're going to be the ones that kind of get it going. But I do think there's a lot of players now that are just playing really well. But you do bring up a good point. Like, is it the competition? They're not playing enough good competition to really get themselves better. How much better are they getting in the last 5, 6, 7 games of the season here?
However, they proved themselves, I think. Like I said, remember that we were worried about Princeton, that if that game was too close, it would go down in the rankings, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
They stomped on them. They went to Princeton and stomped on them. Yeah. So, but the other thing about the draw controls yesterday was a perfect example. I think intentionally, Joe Spallina relied less on Massera on the draw controls, got Verhulst a lot more, and gave other people chances at it too. Because, as it turns out, again, the wealth spread very, very nicely, 16/12 on the draw controls, but nobody on Stony Brook had more than Massera did get 6. Okay, fair enough. But Claire Levy had 4, Verhulst had 4. Okay, so options, seeing how they do. Again, like the Wednesday afternoon baseball game. Mm-hmm. Run guys out there, okay? Give Paradine a day off behind the plate and put the freshman back there.
Yep.
Okay, which they did this past week.
Yeah, this is a top 10 team. Do I think they're going to go all the way? Probably not. But they got a better shot, I think, at going all the way than the Nets do in the NBA in that loaded Eastern Conference, which is something we definitely got to talk about now.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy. Okay, because, yes, the NBA regular season is over. And, mercifully, I think, for the Brooklyn Nets, because...
No, for the Knicks.
And
mercifully for the Knicks, it's over.
Well, Brooklyn...
The Nets, they're in the playoffs.
Yeah, they did with a flourish. They destroyed Indiana. Not really. It was a very high-scoring game, back and forth, 134-126. But the playoffs do begin this week, and the bracket is in place. And the play-in tournament, we will have the... 7-8 Brooklyn Cleveland with identical 44-38 records, and this was a Brooklyn team. The first half of the season was cruising. Then they went into that 10-game slide, and
everyone got hurt,
and or got COVID or something like that. But the important thing here is that they were able to bounce back and tread water, because you want to compare and contrast with a team that faced similar circumstances. The New York Islanders, they're not going anywhere this year, because they dug themselves too deep a hole. Brooklyn was able to dig themselves out just enough, because they weren't that great in the second half.
No,
and
they had
even
a great
at
first
full
half.
strength.
They really struggled around the All-Star break before and after, and then they had a really strong. That's the benefit for Brooklyn, is they have a really strong last half of the season where they're entering on a bit of a roll. Of course, beating the Knicks earlier this week, beating the Rockets. Beating Cleveland on Friday, who they're going to face again this Tuesday, is big. So, going in on that 4-game win streak is going to be huge for them, obviously, finishing out on top.
Yeah, so Brooklyn gets Cleveland, and, of course, the winner will take on the Celtics.
Yeah.
And the Celtics, of course, and here's another funny thing. And, again, turning the clock back to the lockout-shortened 98-99 season with the Knicks. The Knicks had picked up Latrell Sprewell. Basically, he was given to them by David Stern, but because he was tight with Dave Checketts. But that's another story. The main story was that this team, of which expectations were very, very high, went only 27-23 in the 50-game NBA season. Now, 50 games in a typical NBA season means around late January, early February, right? So if you're 27-23, you're doing okay, but you still got a whole 30 more games to find your stride. Knicks didn't have that, so you go in as an 8, and still to this day, I don't think an 8 has gotten to the finals.
No,
but they did. They did, and eventually losing to San Antonio, but. And what a dramatic run that was! That was Larry Johnson's 4-point play and all that. And when he hit that shot, it was like somebody blew the roof off the Garden. The crowd just went boom. It was an explosion. But never seen anything like that since. But in any case, the whole point here is that they were a much better team than their record indicated. Can you make the argument about Brooklyn here?
I think you can, but it's just a matter again of being healthy, number one, and getting guys like Ben Simmons in particular. He's going to be out for the play-in round, but should they advance, and they likely will, and face Boston, what's his health going to be like? It's good that he's ramping up, but he's someone I think Brooklyn desperately needs. Just watching this team, more so on the defensive end than offensively, because they definitely need a big interior defender besides Kevin Durant and Andre Drummond. Those are the only two they got, and they need a guy who's able to get them boards and fight down low for them, get them second chance opportunities. Because we saw today's game with the Pacers. The Nets were dominant in the first half and immediately coming out the locker room. And the same thing happened against the Rockets as well, where they're just completely sluggish. There's no offense, and they give up 10, 12, 17-point runs like they did this week, and they get the other team back in it. And although Brooklyn won those games, they have to be consistent, I think, through those 4 quarters. So we know the offense is there, but the defense just comes and goes. And you can't do that against a team like Milwaukee because they make you pay like they did a couple weeks ago when they gave up that 10-0 run and eventually lost to Milwaukee in overtime.
In a way, you can make the argument that it's almost fortunate that they finished in the 7 because they've gotten the 6, they would have gotten Milwaukee.
Right. Although Celtics have certainly had the Nets number the past couple times. Of course, Jason Tatum 52-point game.
But seriously, who would you rather face in the first round of the playoffs?
In the Eastern Conference, 1 through 10 is a monster. I've not seen parity to this level. I don't think ever in my lifetime.
I mean, if anybody,
it's funny because look in the West, right? And you just know it's going to be Phoenix, Golden State, right? That's likely going to be it. And those two are just monster teams. Phoenix especially. To me, I know they're the 1 seed and it's kind of cursed to be that entering in the playoffs, but I don't know who beats Phoenix. They look phenomenal. I don't know how to pick this 1 through 10 in the East just because every team looks like they can beat every other team.
Yeah, but the surprise here, look at Memphis. Memphis has a better record than Golden State, and Dallas is only 1 game worse.
Yep.
Here's what I don't get. What is going on? Why do we have a play-in tournament? Is this just
to
money?
expand the playoffs?
Is that what it is?
Expand opportunities. I mean, they're expanding the baseball playoffs for the same reason.
Right, just for the money, right?
Oh, absolutely, because you're guaranteed, number 1, sold-out buildings, number 2, better TV ratings, because more so, I think, than maybe any of the sports, and that even includes the NHL.
Right.
The NBA is all about the playoffs.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for the NBA as well, there's also, let's not shy away from it. Right. Tanking has definitely been an issue the past few years. And obviously what brought to the limelight was 76ers, purposely tanking for a few seasons. And they ended up getting Embiid, Simmons, etc. Now with this play-in, if you're a team like the Hornets or the Hawks or the Pelicans, they would have given up long ago, right? Probably at the All-Star break because they were well under 500, especially if you're the Pelicans in this case, right?
Again,
but
more
now
so
you don't
than
have
the
to tank.
league.
Right. But now, if you're the Pelicans, you don't have to tank because you're going to make a playoff spot if you remain consistent. And sure enough, they overtook the Lakers and jumped up over the Spurs to get that nice spot in the play-in.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is that the records of the top 8 teams in the West tend to be better than the East. So a sub-500 record, sometimes you can sneak in on an 8 seed, a 7 or an 8 seed in the East. No chance in the West.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So that's the beauty of the play-in because you have 7, 8, and then 9, 10, and from there, those 9 and 10 teams, the winner of that, is going to duke it out, and then they'll face, I believe, the loser of that 7, 8 seed. Battle.
Yeah. So loser of 7, 8,
like.
winner of 9, 10, and then the winner of that becomes the 8 seed.
Right. So hypothetically, there could be a scenario where the 7 seed Timberwolves, who looked really hot at closing out the season, they surprisingly really good team, finishing 46-36. But they could get knocked out by the Spurs, who really haven't looked all that good at any point in the season. But, you never know,
Yeah, and I guess you're saying it's just kind of like a money situation there.
Well, same thing happened in the NCAA when they went from 64 to 68. Or, the NCAA, think about this. When I was a little kid, the NCAA was still 32 teams and conference champions only, which made the NIT much more credible. But then they expanded to 48. then 64, and then half the teams roll out large bids, and that pretty much buried the NIT to secondary status, made it the not-important tournament, as Dave Malone used to call it. But again, more play. Well, you don't want a situation. The NHL was the greatest extreme back in the 1980s when there were only 21 teams in the league, because 16 out of 21 made it. Only 5 didn't.
What an embarrassment, growing those 5 teams.
But you know what? It also meant that a team like the Islanders could win 19 playoff series in a row, 4 straight cups, and get to the finals for a 5th.
Now,
that's true.
My next question on this play-in tournament situation, can you be a lottery pick then and make the playoffs?
Now I think you can.
I don't know. Because I think lottery is...
Originally, lottery was originally made up of teams that failed to make the playoffs.
Right. No, I don't think you could be a lottery and make the playoffs.
Yeah, but what if you're the 10th seed? And then you win one of these playoff games, you're not gonna stay in the lottery?
I don't think so. I think because then you move up and you...
Then what's the incentive in winning
it's still
that?
teams that fail to make the playoffs get into the lottery. It's still true.
Right.
But here's the thing. Under the current rules, only the top 4 picks are decided by the lottery. They are chosen from the 14 teams that don't make the playoffs. The team with the worst record, or the team that holds the draft rights to the team with the worst record, has the best chance to obtain a higher draft pick after the top 4 positions are selected. The remainder of the first-round draft order is an inverse order of the win-loss record. So only the top 4. So that kills tanking right there.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be among the 4 worst teams in the league.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no. You're among the 14, but only the top 4 get decided by the lottery. I'm correcting myself here. So yeah, and, yes, you're in the lottery, but because of that, you're among 14. Tanking doesn't help you unless you fail to make the playoffs.
Exactly. Unless really you're the Rockets or the Magic, or like dead last. There's just no point in tanking.
But the thing I hate most about the NBA. And I even said this to Adam Silver's face. What are you gonna do about a year where you have a team that goes 73-9 and another one that goes 12-70? No other league has those extremes.
That's true.
Of super good and super bad.
That's true. Yeah, but
what was his answer? What was his answer to that? How do you even respond? Yeah, how do you even respond to that? Right?
Oh God! And how could he? I mean, David Stern would have come up with an answer because he came up with answers to everything.
Right? Yeah.
David Stern was one of the sharpest people I've ever met. Yeah. I mean, you look, say what you want about him behind the scenes and stuff like that. David Stern had an answer for everything.
Now we're speaking about playoffs and just transfer over to hockey. The Rangers obviously clinching their first time since 2016. Very exciting. But the crazy thing is where they're at now. Hurricanes won today, but they're only 2 points behind the Hurricanes, which is a team that's been struggling over their past 10 games, 5-5. So, we're looking at a hypothetical here where the Rangers could somehow overtake them and take the lead in the Metro, finish under the Panthers in the Eastern Conference, which is absolutely ridiculous to think about.
There's still so many games. They still have 9 games left to play.
It's a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
But we're looking at the Penguins, who they were behind for a while. They've gone 3-6-1. They did win today, but they've gone 3-6-1.
Yeah, but
Capitals struggle.
There's still enough time left in the schedule where they can make up the difference. They're 6 points down on the Rangers and 8 points down Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
But the wild card, here's the funny thing, okay? Because Boston's in the Atlantic Division, of course. Boston is actually 1 point ahead of Pittsburgh, but they're 1 point behind Tampa Bay. So, we're far from decided here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for all we know, we could end up with a Maple Leafs, Bruins, Capitals, Penguins wild card, and it's it would be absolutely ridiculous to see those 2 juggernauts in the wild card round.
Yeah, because Washington, the second wild card is pretty much locked down because the Islanders are at 75 points, 15 behind Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And despite the fact, even if they win out, it's not going to help them much. Well, right. 20 points will add to it, but basically, if the Islanders won out and they have 11 games left, that would give them 22 points. Okay, that would put them at 97. The only problem is that either Boston or Washington would have to lose almost all their games. And do you really think that's going to happen?
Definitely not Boston. Capitals
would have to tank in a historic fashion.
Yeah.
I mean, the Islanders have put on a good show. 6-4-0 in their last 10. They're playing finally like they were supposed to all year, but kind of like the Nets, they fell into a rut and. COVID, and they were basically running their minor league team out there, especially on defense. They were in trouble. And that, in an 82-game season, a bad stretch of 10 games can kill you. And that's what happened.
Yeah. And that was the biggest difference, too, just comparing those two teams, right? With the Nets, they had a bad stretch, but they were able to overcome it. And for how loaded the Metro is, obviously, how good the Rangers got, the Penguins, Capitals, Hurricanes, who've been good the past few years, that was the difference maker because, hypothetically, they could have a shot if they were in the West, for example.
Well, the other thing, too, is that in the NBA, you hover around 500 and you're in playoff territory. You do that in the NHL, and that's not good enough because point percentage, Washington's point percentage is 625, okay? They're 40, 22, and 10, and they're barely, and they're in the last playoff spot in the Eastern Conference. Not going to happen, okay? Yep. Same thing applies in the West. Dallas is 41, 27, and 4. Vegas is only 2 points behind, and Vancouver is 6 points behind, within striking distance. But, even Nashville and Dallas have pretty respectable records. Merely hovering around 500 in the NHL ain't going to cut it.
Yeah, it's be fun to watch, but it's tough keeping up with everything, especially with baseball coming back. And I know you two definitely have your thoughts.
Speaking of which, because we do have a couple of minutes here, I just want to take a look at what the Yankees did tonight, and
they lost 4-3.
Lost 4-3, so they took 2 out of 3 from the Red Sox, which is good, but. Of course, the main complaint among the various fan forums that you might encounter on social media or elsewhere is that the Yankee fans are still sour. Number one, because Aaron Judge didn't sign a deal, and
that's unbelievable right there.
Yeah,
think about that. He's going to turn 31 next year, and he opted not to sign a contract, which honestly,
who is whispering in his ear?
And he's not a Boras player. He's not under Scott Boras.
Because Boras would have told him to sign. I mean, Boras, look, I still remember, again, more Yankee history for you, Bernie Williams. Bernie Williams, especially his first couple of years as a Yankee, they would say, they would offer him center field and he'd play himself out of it because he's not a great base runner or he was inconsistent. Started to settle into his groove. But he also said, especially right after the 96 championship, he said, every time my contract was up, I had to fight. Because they would always point out some flaw in my game for give me an excuse to pay him less. So what does he do? He hires Scott Boras. Boras plays it brilliantly. Courts the Red Sox. Red Sox make him a big fat offer. And George begs Bernie to stay. And Bernie, it's like Jerry Maguire, the movie, was out at the time. It was a perfect example of what show me the money really meant. And it wasn't necessarily the money. Because Bernie, all he said, match the Red Sox and I'm staying. And George said, you got it. Done.
Yeah, I guess you look at it, he's just betting on himself right now.
Yeah. And I don't think he should because he's basically been living off one great season.
Yeah.
I'd say 2 or 3, but yeah.
No, I mean, the Mickey Mantle 1956 season. Okay?
Yeah.
But that's
season.
That's what athletes do, though. They bet on themselves.
Well,
and
$240 million. That's a big bet.
I don't know how you turn it off, especially where you haven't played a full season since that phenomenal.
And if he gets hurt again, kiss it all goodbye. Because he won't get the offseason.
Yeah. Now, before we sign up, obviously, got to talk Mets, and beautiful start for them, 3-1. And I'll talk about a team where they don't got money issues. Man, it's great to see the Mets. They signed 5 of the top 50 free agents over the offseason, and it showed, 3-1. And even then, lose DeGrom. Tyler McGill steps in, pitches phenomenally for them, strikes out Juan Soto, which ain't easy to do. And Bassett as well as Scherzer come out, have great starts. They lost today, which sucks, but they had the lead at least for most of the game. And Greg, it was just fun baseball to watch, I think, this weekend.
It's going to be fun all year. Go ahead.
Yeah, you made a great point about the DeGrom thing. I mean, that would have killed the team.
Last year, absolutely. It did kill the team last year.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? In the last 10 years, an injury like that would just end the season for the Mets, right? And it's great with the money that they have now. Yes, exactly. Good point. But it's great with the money that they have right now that they can recover from those things. And it's like, well, all right, move on, next person.
You know what? Minus today, too, the offense that all really clicked. Just entering today's game, they were 5 for 14 running the scoring position. Guys like McNeil, Escobar, Alonso, obviously, with the grand slam. Everyone, Lindor today hit a home run. Everyone is stepping up, which is big, Matt.
Yeah. Well, again, that's Cohen. And all the Mets wanted was an owner who was willing to win. Okay? Cohen is not George, but no one's George. Hal's not George. Now, of course, Yankee fans have accused Hal of not being as willing to win as George is, which is, I think, patently false, but that we can save for another week. But the whole point remains is that baseball is going to be so much fun this year because both teams are, and the Yankees, it's kind of like the Yankees of the 80s. They're trying to fight to keep the Mets from overshadowing them. And if the Mets go on a good run, that's exactly what's going to happen. I mean, we have now, Ken, your generation never experienced it. It's been almost 40 years, 30 plus, since the Mets ruled New York. Yeah. The Met tickets were harder to get and hotter than Yankee tickets. Unthinkable. Because the Yankees had winning seasons, but in the two-division system with no wild cards, they never made the playoffs.
Right.
And the Mets came short a couple of times, too, with great record. They won 98 games one year and had nothing to show for it.